Can AI help foster the future of work? How can the deployment of AI affect the working environments and the workers? How can it preserve and improve job quality, inclusiveness, health, and safety in the workplace? That's definitely what we're going to focus on for our next panel. And as our amazing guests are definitely grabbing a seat, we are going, of course, for sanitary reason, to sanitize the mics, of course, because it's still 2021 for some reason. And I'm really dying to hear from you and from your incredible work on the future of work and related to AI. With you, Dr. Yuko Yaramaya, you're the Executive Director in charge of International Affairs at RICAN and co-chair of the working group Future of Work. Of course. We also have on this stage Dr. Matthias Peisner. You're the Director, Head of Research Area Human Technology Interaction, Fraunhofer EIO, the co-chair of the Working Group Future of Work 2. Then Dr. Jan Ferguson, you are a sociologist at the Institut Catholique d'Arts et Métiers. Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon, you're the founder and CEO of STEMET. I hope I'm not pronouncing it badly or in a bad way. And last but definitely not the least, Professor Uday B. Desai, the former director and emeritus professor, the Indian Institute of Technology in Hyderabad. Thank you so much all for being here on stage, as we're definitely going to dive into this very crucial intersection in between AI and work. Without further ado, Yuko and Matthias, the mics are definitely yours. It might work.
Thank you so much.
It doesn't work.
So sorry.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Before diving into the projects themselves, I will give you some very short history of our working group. I hope we have the slide.
We're definitely going to see the slide in a few minutes.
It's coming.
There you go.
Perfect. So as you know, GPAI is quite unique if you compare to other international organizations. Since its inception, working parties, working groups, have been and continue to be a driving force of GPAI. And as such, from the beginning, you may say you have been working as a startup enterprise. And this, under the COVID-19, that means fully online. So I met my colleagues just now.
Wow.
And we have been working more than 1 year and a half. We feel so comfortable, but physically, I'm so happy to have all of them and missing for others. But anyway, we are here. I would say first 4 months since last July was really, at the beginning it was a little bit chaotic because we have been, 27 experts coming from 15 countries on the screen, never met before, and had to work together. And it was good exercise for us to talk about future of work because we are experimenting new way of working together, even without AI, but it's a good experience. So what we try to do at the beginning is really discussing, brainstorming, and to try to identify what could be key issues to be addressed on future of work and AI. Because so many papers, discussion have been done, we are not duplicating them. So to make short our story, we decided to focus on the practice. Reality check what's going on in the company levels, because we didn't know so much what's happening in reality. So that's why first idea was collecting use cases. and it became the pillar of our working group, and to identify at the same time what should be key aspect should be addressed together. And we have been talking about training, education. We have prepared a transition, but also we have to see in the human machine not only interaction but collaboration. Also, we need to address the issues of bias management and also the condition in the workplace, fair condition. And say we are talking about the future. So we have to talk about the future of work. So that was the first 4 months, and we have been quite successful to prepare the first summit last year and talking about what we achieved with the collections of use cases and how we can be able to integrate all these ingredients. Next slide, please. Then second way, I would say transition phase, because we have been able to, after the summit, steering committee in place, and we moved to the more project-based approaches. So as you know, we have already 2 projects we'll be presenting on. And also, through these 2 projects, we try to integrate all different ingredients, because we have been working with the committees, 6 committees, and 1 pillar, 2 pillars, and try to integrate all these ingredients. So we have been working and then finalizing 2 projects, observatory platform and fair work. Next, please. Finally, since April this year, became more stable, but not yet in high level, but we are working on. But we are for sure that we are working on a more sustainable path. And then not only satisfied with the 2 existing projects, because we want to do more. That means we make the last pillar, Living Lab, as a 3rd project that we'll be shortly presenting at the end. But in between, we try to really stay innovative in the way that in between, we try to create kind of a community of students to engage young people, because we are quite senior. We need to have fresh ideas to engage students to be with us and then work together. So I pass the hand to Matthias.
Thank you, Yuko. Before we now deep dive into the 3 projects, I would like to give you a brief overview of how all the projects contribute to our overall goal of shaping responsible AI applications for the future of work. So in order to shape the future, we need to know the status quo, and this is the main topic of Jan's work with the observation platform. We have collected a lot of real AI cases from the companies. And this helps us to understand how AI is used today, what the impact of AI can be on the work environment. And this study helps us to identify the real crucial points, the big challenges that will be addressed when it comes to developing guidelines for fair work with AI. So this is the second project, AI for Fair Work. We will bring in all our expertise from the diverse experts from the working group, but we will also initiate negotiation and consultation with stakeholders, from employers, from employees as well, from unions and so forth, to have a tripartite negotiations about how we can shape the future of AI at work. But to be honest, and at least to be modest a little bit, we don't know exactly how AI can be shaped for the future. Therefore, we need a space for experimentation. And this is the 3rd project presented by Uday. So I think it's time to move to the presentations now and hand over to Jan.
Thank you, Matthias. When we think about the future of work, we immediately think about the future of workers. And it is normal because we are very worried about the future of workers around two key questions. How many jobs could be destroyed? And how many jobs could be transformed? And what will be the nature of these transformations? What will be the key challenges for workers? What the challenges workers will have to face? And this project is trying to give some answers by understanding the current real use case of AI at the workplace. I am not talking about a sensational AI system the media are talking about every day. We are investigating ordinary AI system at the workplace, real-life AI systems. And at the moment, believe me, it's a very, very hard challenge for AI designers. We used to talk about the Turing test to talk about how smart can be a machine, but the walking test is very challenging for AI. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and that's the end of a story. But most of the time, it does work, more or less, but it's only the beginning of the story. Because when you succeed technically, you have to face the social issues. And designers are discovering that working is not only about performing tasks or achieving goals. Working is a social activity, meaning organization of work, values of work, and professional practices. And they are not prepared to this. So that was my introduction to get your attention, and now I will talk about what we did this year. Next slide, please. So first, the objectives of the platform. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. So the general objective is to having a compilation and analysis of ongoing, conclude, experiments and real-world cases of AI at the company level. So it meaning providing insights to the current state of art in AI interfaces and AI-driven processes for the worker's perspective. So to achieve this objective, the operational objective is to build a catalog of use cases of AI system deployed in workplace and organization, to build this snapshot of AI at the workplace. And the third objective of this observatory is to feed the over committee of a group Yuko talked about before me. So second, the activity of building a catalog. Next. So in 2021, we decided to systematize the interview survey. If you remember last year, we did a mix of online survey and interview. And what we found is really better to meet someone when you want to understand what happened really, okay? So this is about interviews of around more or less 75 minutes. And we big focus on a real use case. This is not AI in general. And we ask questions around 5 dimensions: motivations for AI system implementation, participation of workers and the representative and the process defining, designing and developing the AI system, the role of alchemy and in the implementation of the AI system, consideration of ethics and the design process, and last but not least, the impact of AI system on employment, work, and organizations. Next, please. So something really important we did this year was to create this students community. So what it brings to us? First of all, it's allowed us to increase the number and quality of use cases in our catalog. So that was a benefit. But we just wanted to have a service from them. We wanted to bring something to students. So this is the other point. And this is also the reason we started with only 5 students, because we wanted to learn how we can help them, manage them, and offer them a high-level international experience that enriches the student skills. So that's very important because we wanted to prepare a future generation of GPAI experts. So for that, to reach these goals, we didn't know how many students were able to help, to follow, to support. So we started with only 5, and next year we hope that we will have 20 GPAI junior investigators. We already start with Japan, and we are hiring. So if you have some appliers in your country, you will be very helpful to present them. Next, please. Second point is the choice of use cases. So for the moment, it's really, as we say in France, open bar. We accept every use cases because first of all, it's quite hard to identify a use case and to have an appointment with someone who accepts to talk about it. So for the moment, we accepted every kind of use cases in every sectors, even if we have connection with OECD because they have their own survey, so we want to avoid overlap between our work and their work. But next year, we want to use this very, very interesting model, this very interesting diagram created by a member of our group called Boris Stokowski, and this will help us to bring more diversity to our sample. So as you can see now, for the moment, we try to place every use cases on this modelization, and for the moment, it's very unbalanced because we have 25 use cases in digital coworkers function of AI. So next year, we want to something more balanced. Next, please. So now findings and recommendations, what use cases say. Next, please. So some general comments. First of all, if you consider end user use cases, most of these use cases are currently proof of concept. They are POC. Okay, and what we can, in general, identify as a big subject is, for the moment, performance is necessary, is mandatory, but it's not sufficient condition because AI systems really deeply challenge organization. You need to reorganize because AI systems imply rethinking the organization of the activity. You have to socialize because AI systems destabilize the value system associated with the activity. And we have to think about practice because AI systems transform, generate, or destroy professional practices. And this is something really important. But second, beyond success of failure, experiments enrich organizations. First of all, it seems that we can talk a lot about AI, but a POC is an obligatory step, a mandatory step, if you want to understand in depth what is an AI system at work. Talking is not enough. You have to experience. Second, the realization process of a POC produces an organizational learning effect because it engages a formalization process of knowledge and know-how of an organization. Some respondents told us that they discovered that the process was not precise enough. And that was a moment we can talk about the practices, and it was an interesting moment for that. So AI system bring an opportunity to talk about knowledge and know-how in organization. Next, please. So now, to finish our recommendations, we have 3 categories of recommendation inspired by practices or recurring problems. First category is about the success of use case. So the first one I will develop a little bit later is establishing methodological principles of a POC beyond the performance of the AI system. Because for the moment, we are very focused on the performance of the AI system, how efficient it is. Second, encourage and improve integration of academic research. Second category, empowering the worker. Define the right trade-offs between usability and user involvement. Build a situated explainability of an AI system. And third, develop a general AI training independent of a particular application. Third, fair AI, accompany use cases with an independent ethics committee, and bring diversity in teams to reduce biases in data. So I will develop 3 recommendations now. Next, please. So first of all, the success of the data, establishing methodological principle of the POC beyond the performances of AI system. So I talked previously about reorganize. AI systems imply rethinking the organization of the activity. Let me give you an example. This application was dedicated to a nuclear power plant. And the objective was to compare feedback from experts about an incident and feedback from sensors. Because it seems that there is a gap between these two kinds of feedback, and it's interesting to identify them to improve their knowledge around incidents in central nuclear points. And that was a very, very nice innovation process. The workers participate to the design of a solution. They were very happy with this experience. But at the end, the problem was it had additional screen, additional information, and the cognitive load for workers was too much. So at the end, they said, okay, it's very efficient, very interesting, we are happy, we are not afraid anymore of AI, but we can use it because we have to rethink the whole workstation, the global workstation, and this is really it's harder than just doing a proof of concept. So let's see, we'll do it later. First, socialize. AI system destabilize the value system associated with the activity. So this is the example of Robert. Robert is the name of a cobot. And this cobot has to support people working in a yogurt company. And there's a problem. They have to identify the presence of bacteria. And there are two activities, some manual activities and some analysis activity. And for the manual part, they ask Robert to do it. The problem was, in this company, being accountable for a health crisis is it's a very, very high value. And nobody wanted to be accountable for Robert, because if it appears that there's a problem and Robert was the source of a problem, who is responsible for Robert? And all the people on the organization said, not me. I don't want to be responsible for cobot. I don't know what it means. So they are waiting for the future. The last one is practice. So as I said, AI system transform, generate, and destroy professional practices. So the example this time is a vocal assistant for technician in industry. So the AI designers visit a textile company, and he identified a use case because workers 3 or 4 times a day, they have to leave the workstation to go to the data room to input some data about the activity. And the AI designer of this vocal assistant said, okay, maybe we can imagine a use case. The workers will just have to dictate the data to the vocal assistant, and the vocal assistant will input the data in the file. That will be a good solution, and it will only take a few seconds. And the manager said, okay, that seems to be a good idea, but there is a problem because this data room is not only a place for data, it's only a place to talk with other colleagues. It's always having a time for breathing. Okay, stop having a break, talking, and also because the environment of the company was very noisy, and this data room was very calm. So I already know that if I told them that this is the end of this break, they will say, no, we don't want this AI system. So this is something very challenging for this AI, which it works, but people said no, because we want to have this kind of, we don't want to stop breathing. And AI have to let people breathe, as you know. Next, please. So the second recommendation is empowering the worker, how to define the right trade-offs between usability and user involvement. For many people, the easier the user experience of an AI system is, meaning fluid, user-friendly, intuitive, and ergonomic, the faster the AI system will integrate professional practices. It seems like it is common sense. It has to be easy to use. But the problem is that this user-friendly AI could generate passivity and lead to disengagement synonymous with disemployment. So this is not, we are not talking about a phone game, an application for playing. It's really something that you will use at work, and you don't want to be passive. So we think that HMEs should consider good levels of compromise between user-friendly and cognitive engagement of the user. And the example we give is an application for skin disease diagnosis interaction. So the idea was to help general practitioner to improve their diagnosis in skin disease. And they try to not to give something like 90% chance of a disease, but something like more they organize a diagnosis interaction between the general practitioner and the AI system, not just a top-down approach, but a mutual thinking approach. Next, please. Last recommendation I want to develop is how to accompany use cases with independent ethics committee. So it's funny because there's an apparent consensus on the centrality of ethical issues. The understanding of ethical issues is not homogeneous. That's something we discovered on the field. We talk about ethics, but we all have a different definition of what ethics is. Many countries and organizations have produced regulations, commitments, or ethical charters, but we think that there is a missing link in the chain. The implementation of its principles for a particular AI system in a specific economic and social context. This is what we call practical AI ethics skills. And this is something missing. And we think that the public authorities could have a role to play in encouraging the integration of ethics and the development of an AI system and its employment in a profession. And that was an idea we had from a company who created an independent ethics committee with a philosopher, with a prefect, with an army officer and other guests. And every time they have a new demand from customers, from potential customers, they have a discussion, okay? What do we want to do? What is fair? Well, of course, it's AI for video surveillance image analysis, so it's a very, very important to have this kind of reflection. So that was my last recommendation I want to develop. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Anne-Marie is next with AI for Fair Work.
Indeed, and thank you very much. As Yuko said, it's lovely to be here with everyone. It's felt like a very global enterprise, but it's fantastic to be able to be here with everybody, of course, hybrid as well. So the deliverable I'm going to be speaking about is the AI for Fair Work set of guidelines. And even though it's just my name on this slide, it's not just me that's done this work. Callum Cant from the Oxford Internet Institute is also here. My co-chair is Mark Graham, and we also have an OECD observer in Stain Broker. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking through what we're wanting to do as part of this stream within Future of Work, what we've done, and what we're going to do. So if we can head into the next slide, and the one after that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Awesome. So what we set out to do under the project vision was create a set of AI for fair work principles through tripartite consultation. And this was quite an important part for us. For us, it was interesting to look back through what we have already, existing principles, and see actually there's a varying degree in which those three different sides of the equation are included in a lot of the thinking that's gone already in this space of future of work and AI. In particular, its implementation within the workplace, but also fairness and equality and some of the issues that we heard there from Jan. And so everybody has come up with their own set of ethical AI principles, from the Pope to big tech. You know, everyone's getting in on this. And so being able to codify that and even agree on what it is, to Jan's final point, is something that has been tough to do. And so in trying to use this as an opportunity, we wanted to set a global standard of fairness in the workplace applications of AI technologies, and also correct the failures of where previous AI ethics frameworks have not been able to really advance and be implemented and be impactful in the way that they should have. And this is something we definitely wanted to change. So principles, we need to lay the right kind of foundation. Second on that was implementation. There's no point having the guidelines if they're not implementable, if they're not tactical enough, if they're not useful enough, if they're not detailed enough for people to really enact them and follow through on these regulations and follow through on what is supposed to be done. So this was something that we are aiming to do within the project, to create the correct infrastructure to support this implementation. And at the moment, the concept is by launching a public accreditation system to support and evaluate employers, in addition to whatever else might need to go on at a governmental or even higher level. And this is the kind of the two big parts of what we're aiming to do within the project. And then the third element, therefore, afterwards will be scaling that up and seeing that happen across different countries, across different spaces, and hoping that we have the right kind of funding, the right kind of infrastructure, the right kind of support to then ensure that this is able to scale to a really impactful side. So, next slide, please. What we have done so far. So if we head into the next slide, we have already worked through some critiques and a literature review of existing fairness frameworks that are out there that have been developed by lots of different folks. And this is some initial work that's been led by the team at the Oxford Internet Institute, who have identified 4 major critiques of the existing AI ethics literature, which we've got here on the slide. So the first set are ethical. And this is kind of our understanding and our definition of what that means within this context. Default ethical theory has been consequentialist, which is that if you choose this option that produces the best outcome for the most people, it will work. It's kind of utilitarian approach. And it's quite hard actually to predict all outcomes, what the optimum is, for whom it is optimum, when does that change, who does that change, what are the different factors that feed into it. And so it treats quite a lot of what we're considering at the moment as if it's one massive trolley problem. But we all know that what happens next is rarely assured, but also it's a lot more complicated than that. And in the different types of workplaces that we have to consider where AI is being applied, in the different countries, in the different settings, in the different societies, this is something that's pretty tough and hasn't been sorted properly. The second are the technical issues. And AI often is seen as this exceptional phenomena, kind of, it's amazing, it's going to solve all the problems, it's very scientific, no bias, all these amazing things. And it's not quite seen actually as what it is, as many other technologies are, the field of technology is, which is that it's a part of a long lineage of work. It's still not something we've got the complete answer on. And so actually, at the moment, we're still in the kind of early days of AI, if I can be forgiven for saying that. A lot of this is about advanced statistical analysis rather than, genuine intelligence and something that's genuinely autonomous. It's also reflected quite a lot of the existing types of power as well. Who is making these decisions and what are the power structures that they're trying to maintain and how that is put through by the technology. But also, we're not starting ex nihilo. We're not starting from a zero. Like we said, it's a long lineage. And so actually, as we technically evolve, how are we reflecting that then in the frameworks that we're putting together? And it's so important for us to consider that. Thirdly is political, which is that high-level principles are rarely been applied because moving into the concrete detail is going to entail debate. I'm excited to say I'm a trustee at the Institute for the Future of Work, which is partly why I joined this group. And excited to say today, actually, we've had a report from one of our all-party parliamentary groups with a couple of MPs who have kind of taken on the idea of this algorithmic impact assessment. There's an inquiry paper that's available if folks do want to take a look at ifow.org, but this is us, at least in the UK government, realizing that we need the political will, political understanding as well to enact a lot of these frameworks and make them happen. But this is, of course, not something that's happening wholesale and across the board. But the detail that is needed is a lot higher than what we have at the moment and what is put out by quite a lot of the frameworks. And so the transition from these abstract codes to concrete regulations is also taking us really from ethics into politics, which I think we do have to definitely recognize that, there's a lot at stake here. And then fourthly is social, and this failure to separate powers. AI ethics were implemented by the people who design and sell AI. There's quite a lot of marking our own homework, or even when you don't do that, famously we've had Google fire 2 top ethicists in the past year. And so we're still trying to figure out, this tension between profits and fairness. but also including the worker perspective in the way that we implement this. And then to some of the points that we've heard already, the fact that the research into ethics has got to be independent. It has to be separate, it has to be outside. And so that brings me to our plan. So in our next slide, please. Here's what we will do next. Next slide, please. So we have a theory of change that we've put together, and we'd love, if anyone is interested in seeing this in more detail, to reach out to our Future of Work group, and we'll be able to share this. But we've essentially got 9 steps, 9 objectives to get to before we're able to launch our accreditation scheme by Q3 2022. Our first internal draft of principles will be ready by the end of this quarter, with 2 further rounds of feedback with different groups of tripartite stakeholders, which will result in an outward-facing iterative draft of principles by Q2 2022. And to kind of lean into some of the issues that we highlighted in the previous slides, this will also continue to be iterative. It's a moving field. There's lots that's happening, and as these things are progressing, we also need to ensure that we're keeping it fresh, so we will be doing that. And then transition into creating the structures required to launch the principles and accredit compliant employers. And for us, I think, we're unique in that, again, this isn't just about government and isn't just about workers groups, but is as much the employers who are implementing a lot of these. And so we do need to have them on board. We do need to ensure we've got buy-in, and we're not just suggesting principles into the air. And so we're super excited at the prospect of being able to use the GPAI platform, the different organizations that are in the room, those who are wanting to join, to be able to build up the strength of this framework and this AI for fair work that we have done. So the final slide, I think I've got 1 or 2 more. Next, please. There we go. We're looking for kind of help and for partnerships to assist on the 2 rounds of feedback, and then, of course, be part of the work going on. Firstly, as I've said, employers have an overriding responsibility for the ethical implementation of AI technology in their workplaces. We are all keenly aware that the worker voice also has been systematically underrepresented in AI discussions so far, so even when it is there, it's not put at the forefront, although in the UK, with the Institute for Future of Work, we've definitely been leaning into that voice. So we need to make sure that we take corrective action in the way that we implement this and go forward. And then finally, of course, how can we forget the government's regulation is beginning to catch up with AI, but more progress is needed, and specifically with this workplace focus. So we're really excited to begin on this, and if anyone would like to be involved, please do come reach out, tap me or Callum on the shoulder, and we'd be happy to have you involved in our deliverable. And I think that is my final slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Awesome.
There you go. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm sure our attendees are dying to join the initiative. And next, Houday with the AI Living Laboratory to experiment AI, of course, in the workplace.
Okay. Thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be back in Paris after nearly, I think, about 17 years. This is a subgroup within the working group on future of work, and what I'm going to present today, as Matthias mentioned, is explorative. In the sense, there is no final conclusion on this. We are still exploring this, and we'll start implementing this in 2022. And this is what I have about 3 slides, but they're based on a lot of brainstorming that we did within the working group. And in principle, I would say this subject impacts, and we are very anxious also to get inputs from everybody in the audience and also other working groups out here. Next slide, please. Now, when you talk of a living lab, this is a phrase which has been around in the scientific community, okay? And it has very different kinds of definitions. Okay, so I look at 2 of them: experimentation environment in which technology is given shape in real-life context and in which end users are considered as co-producers. I think this is the catchphrase when it comes to a living lab, that the end users are co-producers, unlike that somebody defines something and that the others simply use it. And I'll jump to the last one, which is the living lab, co-creation ecosystem for human-centric research and innovation. So again, the catchphrase here is co-creation ecosystem. Now, we want to capture this co-creation ecosystem, and we want to capture the co-producers into a platform. It will be a initially, our plan is to have a virtual platform. Okay. You may find some of the ideas a little bit in terms of more theoretical in nature, and they are indeed are. But as time goes on, we will bring it down to the ground level and make them into a practice. Next slide, please. So what our proposal is that the first virtual lab that we will launch, it will be a virtual one. Okay. Eventually, in phase 3, we will look at the physical lab because the resources required also are far, far greater for a physical lab out here. And the main objective will be connecting a network of physical living labs, which may be around the world, and we'll have to explore and see if these people will be willing to be connected to our virtual platform. It will allow sharing of applied experiments for assessing the impact of AI at both individual and company levels. Now, if you look at the last phrase, it is all encompassing phrase. It covers the different working groups that we have in GPAI. It also covers the different subgroups that we have in Work for Future. And that's exactly what we are trying to say. Living Lab will allow citizens to experience AI, albeit virtually. See, one should keep in mind that many of us experience AI because we are privileged to experience it. It's not that everybody necessarily experiences AI. I come from India. Okay, so it's a very different kind of a country than, say, France, or for the matter, United States or Germany or Japan. Okay, so I think in that sense, how do we create this opportunity that only on a smartphone one can experience AI? Okay. Today they are like users of AI or consumers of AI. As on a smartphone, a person living in rural India can actually go to Facebook and do something. And in principle, there is a AI engine running in the background as to what to feed him. Okay. A lot of has been talked about here. I used a name. I hope I won't be crucified for it. A company name. Yeah. But the idea is that this experience should be more holistic in nature, and everybody should have an opportunity of it. At the company level, you look at information that will be effective, for the company and for the worker, similar to what Jan talked about, similar to what Anne-Marie talked about. Okay, I won't go through it bullet by bullet. We are running short of time and love to look at questions out here. Last part I'm unable to read out here. Okay. So again, it will be a platform where, different groups, will come together and interact with each other. So one of the aspects is interactive. That's what comes on the next slide. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay, yeah. Design and develop a minimal viable product. Okay, that will be phase 1. And that's what we are going to focus on. So in the next year, phase 1 is what we were hoping to implement. And in 2022 summit, hopefully we should be able to give a demo. Okay, the platform will be built as a website right now. It can be accessed by a mobile device. In fact, the mobile device is very important because today, most of us access things on the mobile devices rather than necessarily a laptop or a desktop out here. Case studies, what Jan talked about, we will try to incorporate them in our platform. Additional use cases also will be incorporated, from chatbots, library of videos, learning skills, etc. So we will try to collaborate with various organizations, various academic institutions, and see if we can incorporate that. Various corporates, companies, hopefully they will come forward and say that, yes, like today, while listening to AI for Earth in the session in the morning, I thought that would be a great thing to kind of incorporate into our living lab out here. We are talking about a living lab called Earth, okay, and it will be nice to incorporate some of the things that Philippe, I forget the full name, that he talked about.
Thank you so much. Again,
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
it's a great invitation to join the initiative.
Just, 2 more things quickly.
Absolutely.
So just give me 2 more minutes. We will try to also incorporate in the first phase a bit of AR, VR. So far, nobody has talked about AR, VR. The augmented reality, virtual reality is coming in a big way. The takeoff has been not as powerful as one had anticipated, but I think we will have a bit of that into our particular platform out here. And phase 2 and phase 3, again, because of paucity of time, I will not spend too much time on this. If there are any questions, more than happy to answer them. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Actually, I was chatting with Yuko because I was like, you know what? Now VR and AI totally makes sense. The Pamulaki listed on the working group is a Pamulaki from Oculus, right? There you go. Thank you so much. So, yep, we definitely have time to take some questions. So if you do have some, just raise your hand. You know how to do it. And a mic will magically appear to help you make yourself loud and clear. Or if you have a question, you can also post it on the platform, and I'll be happy to pass it on. Do we have... Oh, we do have one question at least.
I have a question for the lady in the middle. Sorry, I don't remember your name. You said that the ethical review of AI systems should be externalized. What exactly do you mean with that? Can you be concrete? Say, think of an SME company that's developing an AI system that requires ethical, say, testing, screening, and review. Should they hire an external consultant to do that? Because there are lots of systems that need some sort of review. If you're in the financial sector, you need to check for anti-money laundering. That's done by compliance officers who are employed by the bank. Those are not external people, but they're of course not in the sales team. They're in the quality or in the compliance team. There are many other reviews that are not done by a person who has a conflict of interest. But what do you mean with external?
Hi, my name's Anne-Marie. I said independent, not necessarily external. So it needs to be done by an independent body. I think it's something to do as well with the scale of the impact of the algorithm that's being run. So you need to be able to be independently, so for example, what we've done today with the UK government, with the MPs, has been completing an algorithmic impact assessment that is then able to be verified or be able to be checked externally or be audited or be seen externally or seen by independent group of people that aren't the ones that are involved in the algorithm or the implementation of it. So there needs to be a bit of distance so you don't end up marking your own homework.
Of course, but independent can mean many things. Let me give an example. I'm the CEO of a software company that develops software for computer vision and pattern recognition used for the detection of emotions in people in all sorts of work situations. I'm not a salesperson, I'm not an engineer, I'm the CEO, and the review of the ethical standards and ethical policy is in my portfolio as a CEO, because I have a strong interest in not trespassing ethical lines, not damaging our reputation, and of course I also want the company to be commercially successful. So I'm above all the departments, but I'm not totally independent. I'm an employee of my own company.
Yeah, so but I mean it's the same thing, right? But that's why we're having to still check in on Google with all the algorithms they're writing, right? They have their own reasons why they want to make sure they're doing the correct thing that also doesn't necessarily align with their desire for profit or all the other things they've got as an example. So I think the idea is that you should be able to have it independently verified, independently checked by someone that doesn't have a stake in the algorithm, so not you, not necessarily someone in your organization. And we're not saying it needs to be an external consultant that you pay, but in the same way that you have other regulatory bodies that come in and check things, there should be an independent body that is able to come in and have a look at what are the assumptions, what is the ethics, how does this match up to the framework that we have, or can you demonstrate that you've done your own impact assessment and we're able to see that these are the considerations that you've made, these are the mitigations that you've put in, these are the things that you're warning, or that you are transparent to any of your any of your customers or any of your clients that are using the technology. But it's needing that third party to come in and check because, as independent as you are, you're also not independent as the CEO of the organization.
Sure. Yeah. So we have hired our consultant AI ethics professors from universities to review our policies before implementing them. So we did go external in that phase. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Uday, I think you wanted to jump in.
I wanted to add to what you're saying. See, we all do a financial audit, right? So you have an internal auditor and you have someone who comes from outside. Something analogous to that, I think, is what Anne-Marie and what we had been discussing.
And we have a second question.
Okay, so a quick comment and then the question. The comment is to the previous question. This is actually the context that we're in now in the European Union. We are talking about having these levels of audits. And the idea is that anyway, if you're building a system, a software system, then you should do standard levels of internal audits called DevOps, just making sure that you know what your system is doing. And so all we're saying is that we need to have governments who can come in and check your work once in a while. But absolutely, it isn't that AI magically produces itself, and everybody in the C-suite needs to know that, and I'm sure in this case you certainly did. But not everybody has been knowing that in the smaller companies. So it could be a little higher cost for companies that weren't already doing adequate processes, but that's what we want. We want them to be careful in their production of software.
Yeah.
But my question then is, and I'm in the Responsible AI Working Group, and I think we need to build some bridges in the future. This goes all the way back to Jan's part. There was a part where he was talking about not wanting to take responsibility for the robot because you don't want to be blamed for the robot? And this comes directly to this question. The whole point is that if we are building AI correctly, then it should be apparent who's responsible for the actions of the projects we use. It's not trivial, but it's no worse than the existing situation where you bring in a piece of equipment, and either the equipment, if the equipment malfunctions, it might be the fault of the manufacturer, but otherwise it's the fault of the owner-operator. And so we shouldn't be making this into a big mystery, and I was a little worried about some of the anthropomorphism that might be coming up. So I was wondering if you could talk to that.
Yeah, it was, maybe I can just give a last news from Robert. Because the last news is at the end, someone said, okay, I'm responsible for Robert. So they were able to introduce Robert at the workstation, but not, the premise of a cobot is to put the cobot in the middle of the workers without protection. And this is the next part, the next step, and they are unable to reach it because the security label, or Securitas, they said, okay, I don't know how I can make it secure. If a worker is injured by Robert, I don't know how to deal with it. So the next question is, okay, what happens if there's an accident between a worker and Robert? And for the moment, Robert can work in the company, but not in the middle of the workers. He is outside the group. He has his own place. There's no security, but it is not in the middle of the workers. So this is not a trivial question, as I said, because every time you have an answer, you have another problem.
But the point is, as we were just talking about in the previous question, that you shouldn't buy that piece of equipment if you don't know what its specifications are and the guarantees and everything. And then maybe you also do a trial if you're really worried that you don't trust the people you sourced it from. But I just don't think we should be mystifying it or naming the robot. I think we should be focusing on that we know how to do product safety, and AI is a product.
And I agree with you. So this is our kind of algorithmic accountability act that we put together. And I think it's almost analogous, and just take the analogy, don't take the kind of the implementation, to where we have data owner and data controller. And so what we said is it's the folks that have created the algorithm that have some part of responsibility. But also if you're going to bring it in, you also have to do your own checks and balances. The same way as you wouldn't bring in food from a unruly supplier or whatever it would be, you also need to then check and say, okay, this passes our own tests and our own checks. And this is, again, what we've done that's independently verifiable to say these are the questions, these are the things that we've done before we bring it in and impact it on our employers. So there are bits of work that are already being done on this. Whether there's an answer or a solution that the organizations that put the algorithms together are going to be happy with, I think that's the biggest thing that we have. And especially when you've got employers involved, I think it's also, like we said, the nature of work is so complex that there's actually quite a lot of different things. But I think as we've kind of got a common theme across all of us, it's the detail. The devil is in the detail on all of this, and that's the goal, that's the opportunity that we have to help define some of that detail, to then empower employers and those in governance, and of course also the workers who are at the mercy of a lot of these algorithms in the context that we're speaking about in our subgroup.
Thank you so much. Last question for the session, front row.
Yeah, I have a more generic question. Francis Beck mentioned this morning a study saying that 30% of jobs were at risk due to AI. And finally, did you estimate, or do you plan to estimate, what is the percentage of jobs that will be destroyed, transformed, or generated, in which sector, in which time frame? And the second question that is related, what is the impact in terms of training skills of people, skills of workers, and organization and process of companies?
So that's definitely the crystal ball question about the Black Mirror effect of AI and work. How many jobs will be, checked out of the list by 2050?
I'm saying the co-chairs should say this. I feel like it's out of scope. I don't want to talk out of turn, though. You go.
So we are not prospecting the future. We are not looking after the crystal ball. But For sure, we know that we have proceed to the transition phase, and also not just only accounting the numbers, but the quality of work and the way of doing work, because the concept itself of working will be different completely from now and in the coming 5-10 years. So we should adapt the way of working, and it will be good occasion to enlarge potential for people to bring their expertise to be rewarded and also serving for society. So if we are talking about the future of work, we're completely different of what we know today. And we have to design ourselves by taking action today and exploring all the potential of AI.
Let me, if I can, see, let me give an example from India. Okay, when computers were first introduced, much later than, say, the developed world, there was tremendous apprehension, tremendous opposition from the workers. I'm talking about bankers, people who worked in the banking industry, people who worked for railway reservations. Okay, you name any sector in the economy, computers were introduced way back, I think it was around late 80s, early 90s. And there was a lot, I remember talking to some of them, okay, because, you interact with them. And they were very apprehensive. Today, you talk to the same people, of course, some of them have retired, the guys who have come in their place, they can't live without a computer. So I think as a technologist, I'm a professor of electrical engineering, I've been dealing with technology, and I think AI is essentially in the long lineage of technologies, though perception is that it's something phenomenal, it is not. Okay, let me dispel that particular myth out here. So I think every time a sort of a watershed technology comes into history, there is always this apprehension. Horse carts got displaced by automobiles, etc. This will go on, and this will go on to future also. So I think new jobs will be created. I agree with you completely. We need to do massive amount of skilling and reskilling. That has to be concomitant with everything that goes on in the broad domain of AI.
I just wanted to add one thought, because I think the macroeconomic level is mainly a topic where OECD is very active. So I think most studies predict that the number of jobs we lose by using AI will be similar to the number of jobs we gain with AI. But we said we want, on the GPAI level, we want to concentrate more on the micro level. And I think for this, your last concept of education, qualification, training is really very crucial for the future of work, especially when you think of the individual. And I think we have a subcommittee on training with AI, training for AI, and I think this would be a major challenge for the transformation of our work environment, to really find ways that the individual worker, they can perceive the transformation as an individual chance for them and not as a threat for them. And this is the biggest challenge we have in this area from my perspective, because we really have to avoid a digital divide in the work market.
Well, 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 to the future. Thank you so much to the five of you for your incredible work, perspective, and the next step for the Living Lab to come. Thank you very much. Again, I think they definitely deserve some applause here.